Thank you. I have the privilege of introducing Ramsey County Commissioner Janice Rettman. And Janice is not only a Ramsey County Commissioner, she also chairs the High Speed Rail Commission, which is a commission that's looking at working on this second train study. And the commission is the 5 counties between St. Paul, Winona, and then also including La Crosse in Wisconsin. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Commissioner Rettman. Commissioner Rettman.
I always have to adjust a microphone because I have a tendency to be short. I'm even going to be shorter because you didn't come to hear me. You came to hear about the potential of adding a second train, which I think is something that obviously you all care about. And Tom Fiala, who's back there, look at that man way back there who's waving, we were in La Crosse last night, and they had, the opening newscast said they had an overflow a crowd of people coming to discuss the second train, and we wanted to beat them. So I'm really glad you're here, because it's that synergy between La Crosse and here, and going all the way to Chicago. That is the synergy that the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners, the member parties, we welcome you here because you happen to be at the Union Depot. But my job right now is to have the privilege of representing the High Speed Rail Commission, which is actually the second train. It's about the second train, folks. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to Pravina. I can't say her last name, so I apologize. But she's got the PowerPoint, and she'll show it as many times as she wants. If we fill this group up, get another group in, she'll stay all night. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rettman. And thanks, everyone, for coming in tonight. Thank you for your support. My name is Pravina Pidaparthi. I am the Planning Director at MnDOT's Passenger Rail Office and also the Project Manager for the TCMC Phase 1 study. A little bit on what we have on the agenda tonight. I'm going to walk you through the project background and overview. We'll let you know what we are doing under the current Phase 1 study, next steps for this project, and also it'll be followed by a question and answer session. So a little bit on the TCMC project background. It all started in 2012 when MnDOT and WSDOT requested Amtrak to do a feasibility study on adding a second train between Twin Cities and Chicago. The report was completed in 2015, and it showed favorable ridership of projecting at 155,000 annually on the second train, and an estimated revenue of $6.8 million. So taking those recommendations, MnDOT and WSDOT recommended that we move this study into the next phase, which is Phase 1 that we are currently under right now, and start looking at the service between Union Station in Chicago and Union Depot in St. Paul. As you can see, we had looked at several different termini in the Minnesota area. So we looked at the second train terminating at the Target Field Station in Minneapolis, St. Cloud, and also a suburban station north of Minneapolis. But based on the capital cost estimates that came out of the feasibility study, the state DOTs recommended that we move forward with the second train service terminating at St. Paul because of lower capital costs and less complex rail operations. As you all know, between St. Paul and Minneapolis, it's tough to address those at this time. So to minimize the capital costs, we suggested that we start this service terminating in St. Paul in Minnesota. So as this map indicates, the second train, the TCMC study, will use the Empire Builder route between Union Depot in St. Paul and Union Station in Chicago. You can see all the station stops along the way here. The schedule that we are proposing would be 4 to 6 hours different from the current Empire Builder schedule, and I'll get to a slide where you can see the proposed schedule as well. We are looking at up to 13 stations between St. Paul and Chicago. And the another caveat of the second train is that it would be an extension of one of the existing Hiawatha trains from Chicago to Milwaukee. So if you're riding a train, one of the Hiawatha trains from Chicago, one of those trains would continue on to St. Paul. And the same thing going eastbound, the train that would start here in St. Paul, you would go to Milwaukee, and that train would continue on to Chicago. The maximum speeds that we are looking at for this service is 79 miles per hour. This is not a high-speed rail or an enhanced speed service as we are calling it right now. This is at conventional speeds. And we have come up with a list of infrastructure improvements needed to support this additional service or to operate this train between St. Paul and Chicago. A timeline is, as you can see, this is a timeline of the study. We started in 2012. Phase 1 started in around 2015, and we are hoping to complete Phase 1 this fall. The next step would be Phase 2, which is basically the environmental analysis and approval by FRA, and a service development plan, which is basically a business case for the second train. And after that, we hope to start final design and construction, and service could operate by year 2022. And obviously, there's a big asterisk, as my boss always says, that this is all pending funding for this project. We are funded through completion of Phase 1. Funding for Phase 2 and beyond still has to be identified. Some of the activities of Phase 1 that we are currently doing right now is getting some pre-environmental, pre-NEPA work done, which includes the development of a purpose and needs statement. This is required by FRA for any passenger rail project. We also have conducted route and service alternatives analysis as required by FRA. And we are right now in the public outreach phase. We have completed railroad modeling or operations analysis on this corridor. And in the next couple of months, we will be completing conceptual engineering and developing cost estimates, capital cost estimates, and also equipment costs for this service. So I will now hand it off to Nani Jacobson from HNTB. She will talk in detail about some of the tasks that we have been going through in Phase 1. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yep, up, okay. How's that, better? Okay, great, thank you. All right, so the purpose and needs statement, Pravina mentioned this, that this is something that's been completed, and what this is it really serves as the foundation for the project. It tells you why this project is happening, why we're doing it, and as the project progresses, everything's gonna come back to this statement to make sure that we are meeting that purpose, which is to fill a gap in the transportation system along this corridor. That includes a new service. It includes, getting people to these inner cities along the corridor. It also looks ahead to address population increases. These are already happening, and economic growth is strong. So getting in front of that as well as integrating with the Hiawatha service. Pravina mentioned that. But also, the Empire Builder is very long, it goes all the way to Seattle and Portland. This is kind of cutting out a piece of that, starting right here in St. Paul, then you don't become dependent on a train coming from further away. So you're really looking at this smaller corridor, 410 miles, to have that reliable service. You dig into that a little bit deeper in these need statements. These are really the problems that this project is trying to address. I won't read all of these, but in the summer months, Empire Builder can be at capacity, near capacity. So offering this second daily service is really going to help with that, as well as a different schedule. So we're looking at a 4 to 6 hour difference, keeping the Empire Builder the great service that it already is, but giving that additional capacity. The next one, this is kind of going back just a little bit of history on some of this analysis that's been completed over the past year, looking at the different routes. What this is telling you is that a lot of work has already been done on this corridor over the past decade. We didn't see the need to redo this work, so we looked at all of these different routes that have been looked at, and really what it came down to is utilizing this existing Empire Builder route is the best option to serve the community and to meet those purpose and need statements. Also, when you get to Milwaukee, there's a very successful Hiawatha service. It runs 3 round trips a day, at least Monday through Friday, and integrating with that service, not impacting that, but really integrating and connecting with that service. So the route has been determined. Once you do that, you start looking at the service. So this is really the details of when does it run, how does it run, the route it's going to be on. And again, a lot of detail on this slide, but the bottom line is there's a very detailed process that goes through and looks at these 5 alternatives. And again, we're really trying to figure out what makes the most sense, what can be implemented in a cost-effective way, both to build it as well as to operate it and maintain it. So we don't want something that's going to have an extraordinary cost associated with it and just not be realistic at this time. So the blue one with the check mark is the recommended alternative that we're moving forward with. And what that is, again, is starting or ending, whichever way you want to look at it, here at Union Depot, going through Milwaukee, integrating with that existing service and continuing through. So you don't have to get off, you just continue right through on one of the 3 Hiawatha services down to Chicago, and reverse, so it goes both ways. We also looked at doing nothing. You always have to look at what we call the no-build alternative, but that doesn't solve any of those problems that we outlined. So this is just the process that we have to go through, and it kind of tells you how we got to where we are. The next step is operations modeling. What this really is it's taking a look at what's out there right now. This track is owned by Canadian Pacific, and they operate a lot of trains, and that's their business and their livelihood. So we're adding an additional train. We've been working very closely with Canadian Pacific, and they've been very supportive of the project. So this is putting this service and layering it on top of the existing Canadian Pacific as well as a growth, each year out, and seeing where the conflict points are. Where is there a lot of congestion? Where do trains meet? And trying to really dial it into those areas and see what needs to happen to make this project a reality. What capital improvements would need to occur. So that's essentially what operations modeling is doing. And here's a proposed schedule. This is one of dozens of ideas and options that were looked at. But this proposed schedule, essentially going westbound, it leaves about 4 hours earlier than the existing Empire Builder. Eastbound, it departs about 3 hours, 3.5 to 4 hours later. So, this is an example. A lot went behind this in that integration with the Hiawatha service, in what the freight trains are doing right now, because we really wanted to find something that had the least amount of conflict. So this is just an example of a schedule. It's a lot of detail, and all of this will be up on the project website within the next few days, so you can take a look at it there. And these are 3 areas that when we did that modeling, we put the freight trains in, we put the additional service in. These are 3 areas that we've narrowed it down to where there are those increased traffic and congestion. And what can we do in those places? We're not, again, trying to add, something that's extraordinarily expensive. So we're looking at, upgrading a track that might have been there at one point, no longer there, replacing it, or upgrading switches and adding a crossover and all these, things that don't necessarily take a lot of additional right-of-way and can be done relatively easily for a project like this with the benefit it would provide in the end. Okay, thank you very much.
So one thing I wanted to point out in this map was that because we are tying the second train into one of the existing Hiawatha trains, we are not triggering any infrastructure improvements south of Milwaukee to Chicago. So we are dealing with any improvements west of Milwaukee, and that brings down the cost as well. So as you can see, we have looked at options and have tried to find that sweet spot where we can add the second train with minimal infrastructure improvements needed. So next steps for this project, we hope to complete the phase 1 study this fall. In the next few months, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be completing conceptual design plans for the proposed infrastructure improvements that you saw on the map in the previous slide. We'll be developing capital cost estimates for those proposed infrastructure improvements. And then that will lead into phase 2, where more detailed analysis and obviously environmental clearance will be acquired from FRA. We still have to get direction from them on the class of action, which is basically levels of environmental clearance. There are levels of environmental clearance that are needed. Some of you might be aware of it. Categorical exclusion C, which is kind of the lowest or less complex category. EA is kind of the medium complexity. And then EIS is the highest complexity for environmental clearances. So we have to get direction from FRA on what class of action we have to pursue. And that will be done in phase 2. And it'll also include preliminary design of the service and the improvements that are being recommended. And we'll also need to put together a service development plan. FRA requires one of these documents to be completed before we can move into final design and construction. So as I said, pending receipt of funding, we are hoping that service could start by year 2022 for this additional train. So the most important slide is how to comment on this project. Thank you all for being here. I have answered some questions, and I know you have walked around asking questions, but feel free to pick up one of the comment forms and fill them out and drop them in, because that way we can get your input documented or included as part of the public outreach process. You can take one of these comment forms home and fill them out at your leisure and mail them back to us also. We also have an online comment form on MnDOT's website. So the easiest way would be to click on the rail icon on MnDOT's website. That will get you to the project web page, and there is an online comment form that you can fill out as well. We will be opening this up for question and answer after my presentation here. You can also receive project updates. So there is a link on MnDOT website where you can sign up for email updates on this project, so that you don't have to go and check the project website. If anything changes, anything new comes out, you get the information to your email.